Hello, and welcome to the Race, Wealth, and Health Podcast, a podcast that serves to educate and empower while we explore the intersections of social justice, economic empowerment, and holistic well-being within communities of color. I am your host, Dr. Joycelyn Morris, and I invite you to join me as we dive deep into the crucial topics that shape our lives, challenge the status quo, and strive for a more equitable future for all. This week, we're back to continue the conversation with Anita Kishore on coaching the analytical-minded leader. Let's tune in now. So when it comes to thinking about, and I'm just more to ask some questions from the listener's perspective, is when you think about, so you broke down what the coaching relationship could look like. One of the things you mentioned was in those initial conversations, determining whether or not you're the right fit. And what do you think are maybe two or three things that someone maybe should assess or either you look for, or you would say, someone who is looking for a coach should think about when it comes to assessing whether or not that coaching relationship is the right fit for them?
Really great question. And that's also something that people don't often ask me. But after the initial call with someone, I'll send them an article on just how do you pick a coach? And too bad I didn't write the article. Maybe I shall someday. But the idea is that you should find someone who speaks your language, first and foremost. And I have a directness, a frankness, but hopefully warmth and empathy and honesty that come with my approach. If that resonates, often with people who have analytical backgrounds, I don't have as much of a woo-woo or softer approach, no shade to that approach. That's just not my approach. And if you're looking for that, maybe you're looking for a life coach, or maybe you're looking for a career or executive coach who brings in that side or a more spiritual or other aspect to the work.
Mm-hmm.
You got to find a coach whose approach and whose language resonates with you. Mm-hmm. I'd say that's first and foremost. Mm-hmm. Second, what do you want to be different? When all is said and done, you paid the money, you've spent 6 months working together. And that's a conversation I try to have in these introductory conversations with people, because begin with the end in mind. If you're going to invest in the services of someone who genuinely wants to help you, then you got to figure out if they're genuine. That's that resonance. Mm-hmm. But second, part of it is starting to articulate what it is what you think you may want. But let's be honest, not everybody knows what they want, and they can't articulate that yet.
Yes.
So does the coach help you sit with that? Does the coach help you say, if you don't know that, what do you know? Or what is meaningful for you right now? Or whatever the specific questions the coach asks. But is this someone who you can trust over a longer term to ask you questions to draw things out of you? I think those are two critical things to assess in conversations with a coach, because this is your or your organization's hard-earned money.
Right.
And you want to make sure this is going to be a good fit for you.
I think that's a great question too. And again, I'm assuming there are definitely going to be some listeners who work with coaches, but probably a lot who haven't, right? And so one of the things you mentioned in terms of your style and your approach, like maybe you may want more of a life coach. And so even just thinking about it, how do you see the difference between, say, executive/career leadership coaching versus life coaching, maybe even versus therapy, right? In terms of like,
oh yeah,
how
for sure
you see the lines of those different things, because there are certain parts of maybe the experience that could feel somewhat similar, but I think it's helpful to understand how each role could play something very different for someone who, say, maybe already has a therapist or is thinking about a leadership or executive coach.
One friend of mine calls it, I have this whole support system. Mm-hmm. I have a career coach, I have a therapist, I have my besties, I have my business partner, I have my husband, and she sees all of these different people as part of being on her team.
Mm. Okay.
So it I love this idea, right? Yeah, to cultivate your team. Some people might call it a board of directors, a personal board of advisors. Some people might call it a team. Finding the language that resonates for you, again, is also another important thing. It can be a both and. Now, I do find it interesting when some people have come to me saying, my executive coach is way better than my therapist or something like that. It's not about comparison. I think different people offer different things.
Mhm.
And I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained in psychotherapy. It's not my background. I have had some training in psychology. I've had coaching in training in executive coaching, which has some aspects of psychology to it. But I'm not here to ask or inquire about the details of how someone was raised or their childhood. However, there are some similarities because you are a person.
Mhm.
You are a person who works in an environment, in an organization, or who has a life, or has a family, and the influences that have gotten you to where you are, right? You started this conversation with, how did you get here? What was your background? So I
Mhm.
didn't tell you about everything about dinner table conversations, but those things can influence how we show up in the workplace. So some of the questions that I ask as an executive coach may feel very similar to what a therapist might ask. So you can have multiple forms of help or people on your support team. I also think it's something that hasn't yet come up, but it's, the title of your podcast, right? Race, wealth, and health. What I find really interesting, particularly with folks who come to me seeking leadership coaching, is there are
Mhm.
many people who are coming to me because of my background, because I am a person of color, I am a woman, I am a daughter of immigrant. So that's been an interesting observation
Mhm.
that I've noticed. And sometimes people want a coach or a therapist who has had some of the same lived experience
Mhm.
as they
Mhm.
have. Is it an absolute prerequisite? No. But I'm not shy to talk about my background and who I am. And if that resonates for a potential client, great, let's do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so one of the things out, and thank you for sharing that because I think it's important for folks to understand the differences. But I love your friend's analogy of the full support system and having a team, basically. I think we all need a team or a village, whatever it's called. But tell us a little bit more, because I'm assuming you didn't always start coaching with the focus of the analytical minded leader. And so, why this sort of population, or what did you find and experience in your coaching that led you to say, this is the population that most resonates with you?
There's this expression, we write what we need to know, or we do what we need to hear, or something to that
Mhm.
end. And maybe it was intentional, or maybe it was accidental, or maybe it is kismet, maybe it is. And that just because I don't lead with woo woo doesn't mean I don't incorporate and embrace some elements of the unknown and the mystical. Because I think in my case, I teach what I need to know.
Mhm.
And I think that's where my coaching, my training, my work experience,
Mhm.
I'm starting to write more. I have a Substack. So these kinds of things, in many ways, I'm writing for myself, and
Mhm.
my audience is similar to me. They're not exactly like me. What do I mean? I'm an analytically minded person who comes from a rigorous analytical training and background. I lead with my head and not necessarily my heart. However, I also have a very warm side, a human side. So often I felt frustrated when I was in the workplace or even among friends because they would say, "Oh, Anita, you're so analytical." And it wouldn't be said in a positive way. Or when I would be among very analytical individuals like scientists or consultants, people would just look at me and say, "Why are you so sensitive?" And so I have both sides, analytical and emotional. And it's been a journey to figure out, oh, it's okay for those two to live together. And so once I realized that and started owning that and talking about that, that opened up something in me that could connect with other people.
Okay. Awesome. I love that. Okay. So I think you mentioned earlier about what I wanted more expressly give you the opportunity to cover is being truly a certified coach in this space, right? And what that, just a brief overview of what that certification process looks like and how you feel that separates you from maybe a coach who may or may not have gone through the certification process.
You learn a lot in certification. I'm a huge proponent of getting certified. There is debate on certification online, on LinkedIn. I'm not an evangelist for any one organization over another. I happen to be certified with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. I have also completed training, executive coaching training. And what you learn in a training program. So, what does it mean to be a credentialed coach? It means you have completed several hours, over 100 hours. I believe it may be 125 hours of contact hours. So, training hours, learning about content. It means you have completed at least 100 hours of actually coaching individual.
Okay.
It means you've completed at least 10 hours of mentor coaching, where you've been actively mentored by someone else. It means you've completed an exam. It means you've studied the ethics. So there are elements that are required that you have to go through to get your certification. It's not easy. It can feel bureaucratic and burdensome, like any probably credentialing or certification process.
Mhm.
But it is an important step. And I think it's very important for the ethics because I mentioned earlier that I'm not a therapist. And I very clearly will draw a line when a client asks me something or shares something with me that I am not equipped to handle. I'll give you an example. One client asked me about was sharing that they were experiencing so much burnout and anxiety related to a project at work that they weren't sleeping and they were getting less and less sleep. They were being less and less present for their family and they had young kids. And that for me set off alarm bells. This was more than just burnout. This is affecting their health. I
Mhm.
said, have you thought about seeing your doctor? Have you thought about speaking to a therapist? And it opened up a conversation with this person. They ended up, yes, doing both, scheduling time to see a physician and a therapist. And it's part of that support team. So my ethics require the training that I've had and then the ethical conduct that I am expected to follow as an ICF credential coach is to know where my limits are and say, this is going beyond the capacity that I have to help you, but let me connect you to some other ways or people or ideas that maybe help.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then what I was gonna say, one of the things you mentioned earlier was definitely about your personal experience. How do you feel that your personal experience has shaped your coaching experience and how you approach the way that you coach today?
I consider myself an authentic leader, or someone who relies on being authentic to do the work that I do. And so everything that I do in my coaching is based on the experiences that I've had, the good, the bad, the ugly. I am a pretty reflective person. I'm pretty introverted. I'm totally happy to spend time by myself.
Mhm.
The challenge with that is you can ruminate and get
Mhm.
stuck,
Mhm.
or you can take that and learn from it. And learning can take different shapes or forms. It could be a reframe for something negative, or it could be, I need to speak about myself really more in the positive light, not just, ah, shoot, I made a bunch of mistakes. Oh, I didn't get, that job. I didn't get that client. There's a quote that I love from Wayne Dyer, and he was one of the original the OG motivational speakers. And he says, change your thought, change your life. He said, we have over 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are negative, and 95% are repeats from the day before.
I believe it.
Right. So we get this caught up in these very negative ways of thinking that we've just been ruminating on, right?
Mhm.
But how do you stop that vicious rumination cycle and say, okay, what can I learn from this? And how do I take that forward? So that's where there are all kinds of tools that can help with that. But that's where I take my personal experience. I try to reflect, but not over reflect,
Mhm.
and say, how can I bring this into what I do, who I am, how I coach, how I teach, how I write?
Yeah. No, totally. I love it. Change your thoughts, change your life. That's definitely a great quote. And we're going to be keeping that top of mind. So you mentioned in terms of your work, connecting the head and heart in our work. How do you think, from a coaching perspective, in terms of like leadership, how do you think we should be thinking about connecting our head and heart when it comes to our work?
Well, for analytical leaders, it's not language that often resonates.
Mhm.
So I don't often use that. I might say something like, I coach for analytically minded leaders who want to build the trust, influence, and trust with their teams without losing their intellectual edge. So comes back to that language. For some people, that resonates more. For some people, oh, it's the head and heart. For others, it's head, heart, and hand. So I think finding the language, the feeling that works and resonates for you as an individual. So let's say your listeners are listening and they're trying to figure out, how do I connect my head and my heart? Some of them are going to be like, yo, I got this. I'm good. I lead maybe too much with my heart
Mhm.
and maybe not enough with my head.
Mm.
And that's where I like to bring in things like strategic thinking and frameworks from my background in consulting and science to help people. But honestly, ChatGPT can help a ton with that because that's just information. Bringing in the heart side, I've personally found a little bit more challenging, but maybe that's because I'm coming from the point of view of being an analytical leader. And so it takes practice. It takes willingness to be vulnerable, a big scary word sometimes. And it doesn't mean pouring out your heart work all the time, but even thinking about level of vulnerability. What's something that I can share that's maybe just a fact? Or once I build trust with someone, can I go to a next level of vulnerability? So leading with one's heart is not the easiest thing to do for everybody right away. So I'd say take it in steps.
Okay. Now tell me, as obviously the podcast is called Raise Wealth and Health, and I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, but I'm curious to delve into a little bit more how you see your work intersecting with either one or all of those tenets of the podcast.
There's some implicit and some explicit things. And, I've been following your podcast since it first came out. I think it's just so important and needed. And you bring about brilliant people who have good things to say and offer to the world. So thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you for
I'll start with the implicit first.
coming.
Everything that I've done in my career and my life is based on the values that I have. And one thing that I didn't share, as part of my origin story is going to India when I was a kid. I was 4. My first time, I remember being in India. My nose was pressed against the window and I'm staring out at everything, trying to take it all in.
Yeah.
But I saw these little girls who looked just like me, but were stopped at a traffic light and they're naked and their mothers are begging for money. And that didn't make any sense to me. It said that they're like me. What's happening? And I just decided in my 4-year-old brain that they must be sick or they needed medicine and their mother was begging for medicine. That was how my brain computed because I grew up in a family where we had medicines, when you were sick. So I said, that's not right. I didn't have the words for injustice or poverty. I said, that's not right. I want to do something to help. And while my path didn't go into becoming a physician, I think there is a strong desire to help. And that has taken different forms. in the case of it did start out in a career related to health and healthcare and consulting and pharmaceuticals and affordability and access. And then when I started thinking more about affordability and access, I saw how clearly race plays a role in the lack of affordability and access, even to just basic things like career. So that led me to career coaching and race, wealth. I guess maybe wealth is something I've got to start exploring, or I think it's implicit in this. I mean, maybe that it's at its most frank, we need money to live. Right.
I think it definitely ties into the access, right? The race often does affect access to money and access to wealth, right? So you see typically a very strong correlation there, like you mentioned.
Such a good point.
Awesome. And then what trends are you currently seeing in your work, if any?
Oh gosh, AI all the time, all day, every day.
Mhm.
I feel scared, I feel excited, I feel hopeful, I feel nervous. I use AI in some of my work. I don't use it with my client in the sense I don't take client data or anything the client has shared. It comes back to ethics. You've got to get explicit permission of your client if you're going to take their data and use it in an LLM. But AI is vastly changing the field of coaching, many, many fields. I see organizations that are getting rid of coaches and hiring what they call AI coaches, or not hiring, but purchasing software
Mhm.
to do AI coaching, which is different from human coaching.
Interesting.
And I think there's a role for both, but we're trying to figure this out. And the bottom line I'm seeing everywhere, whether it's coaching or other fields, white collar professions, for example, that are impacted by AI. Can you, as the leader in your field, what do you bring that is truly human and truly distinguishing from being
Mhm.
human? So I have to lean into that and keep bringing that out, which requires me to be a little more vulnerable and authentic so that I can show up for my clients in a way that is real and human and not AI.
Mhm. Well, I was curious, like, what are you hoping that listeners will take away from today's conversation?
There were two themes that I was thinking about, and I didn't explicitly say them. Data doesn't speak entirely for itself.
Yeah.
You've got to give it a voice, whether that's technical data or emotional data.
Hey.
And the second point is emotions are data too.
Hmm.
So analytical people might dismiss both of these things.
Mhm.
But, if you're curious about these things, hey, get in touch. But I think these were some of the themes that I was thinking about when thinking about what I wanted to share with you. And part of what I do is help analytical leaders connect to their heart through the intentional cultivation, expression, and use of emotions. So I'll just leave those two ideas with you, and maybe we have another conversation about emotions another time.
Yeah, no, I love it. I jotted that down. I think you gave us a quote earlier, so maybe what's a book that you'd recommend to listeners?
I've really liked The Long Game by Dory Clark.
Okay.
I constantly going back to her writing, her TikToks, her articles. She's an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur coach. And The Long Game is about building for the long haul, planting seed that might take a while to grow. Hard to have patience, but I think we all need a reminder of that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially in today's world where everything is definitely fast now. As you mentioned, the evolution of AI, everything is like just at your fingertips. It definitely doesn't position us particularly well to strengthen the muscle of patience.
Yes. Oh, what a good word. The muscle phrase, the muscle of patience. Yes.
So, listen, if our folks want to get connected with you, how would they stay in touch? Website, social links?
You can find me on my website, www.anitakishore.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Coach Anita PhD. You can find me at the same handle on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, perfect. And I'll include these, of course, in the show notes, as well as if there are any other like links or resources, any kind of final words that you want to leave the listeners with.
No, thank you for taking the time. I love speaking to you, and I hope we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Anita. This has been such a great conversation. Hopefully it helps some leaders who are listening, even those maybe who might be in process of transition. As we know, there's just been a lot of change and a lot of transitions happening for people right now as there's so much uncertainty due to AI and a bunch of other things, right? So I'm really excited to have finally had you on the podcast to have this conversation. I appreciate all of your support of the podcast over the years, and definitely excited to continue the conversation with you as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joycelyn. Have a great day.
Thank you, Anita.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Enjoyed the show? Be sure to like and rate the podcast. You can find the Race, Wealth, and Health podcast on multiple platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. I also want to hear from you, so don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Race, Wealth, Health. By joining the online community, you'll stay updated on the latest episodes, behind the scenes insights, and engaging discussions. Share your thoughts, comments, and questions there. I appreciate your support in sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues who may also find value in these conversations. Thank you again for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and keep up the good fight for equality.